There we go.
I did my portfolio.
Not yet. Not yet. So thanks for asking. Okay, Kevin. Today we're going to be looking at nonfiction text, and we're going to look at the way the author writes things. Sometimes there's a certain structure that they write a story in that helps you, if you understand the structure and see the structure, it helps you understand what you're reading a little bit better. All right? So let's begin by talking about the difference between fiction and nonfiction. Can you tell me the difference?
Fiction is true to facts, and non-fiction is just what like tales about like not true.
Okay, so what we said, or what we're trying to say, is that fiction is a made-up story, and an example of that might be your Dr. Seuss stories, your Magic Tree House, where you have characters, they have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? That's fiction. And nonfiction is when we learn about a topic. Nonfiction will give us facts about a topic, all right? And it'll teach us something about a topic, all right? And I have some examples here of two samples of nonfiction that we've read in the past, and they're both about frogs, right? This one is a reader's theater. And what did we do in this reader's theater? Do you remember?
We read.
Uh-huh. And what did it talk about in this?
Talk about how frogs and toads are the same but indifferent.
Very good. How frogs and toads are the same and how frogs and toads are different. What did we read about in How to Raise a Happy Tadpole? Do you remember?
It's telling you how to raise a tadpole, like you found in the pond, and it tells you how to get food, what to buy,
It describes how to take care of them, right? How you buy a tank for them and you put stones and it needs a lid. It's describing how to take care of it, right? Okay, so these are actually two different structures of nonfiction that we're going to talk about today. Now, when I use the word structure, have you ever heard used the word structure used about how something is built, like the structure of a house is the way that the house is built? Okay, so that's what the word structure means. It means how something is built. So when we talk about the structure of a story, we're talking about how an author constructed the story. It was kind of like a frame for it, all right? And the two types of text structure we're going to talk about today is description and compare and contrast. All right, have you heard any of these words before?
yes.
We talked about compare and contrast in 3rd grade, didn't we? Do you remember anything about it?
For the sake of an animal, like sort of quoting how they're different or the same.
Good. How things are the same and how they're different is called compare and contrast. And that is one way that authors will construct their passage for you to read. All right. And an example of that is the Reader's Theater. The author who wrote this, they wrote it in the compare and contrast structure. So everything they talked about in this passage was how frogs and toads are the same and how frogs and toads are different. Okay? And then we have a text structure called description, and that describes something. So if we were to describe a frog, we might talk about how he looks, right? How does a frog look?
Small.
He's small, right? And what does he feel like?
Like bumpy or some frogs.
Yeah, actually frogs are smooth and toads are bumpy, but we're just talking about frogs. Do you know what they taste like? No. But you know how they move, right? How do they move?
Move fast.
Okay, how do they move? Do they run? Do they jog? Do they walk? They jump. Very good. So we know how they move. We know what they look like. We know what they feel like. Can you give any examples of types of frogs? Have you ever read about frogs?
With the red-eyed tree frog and the rainforest.
Very good. The red-eyed tree frog that lives in the
poison
rainforest.
one and
Yeah, it's called the poison arrow, poison dart frog? Poison dart frog. Okay, very good. So when we read a passage about frogs and they describe what frogs look like and what frogs do and the different types of frogs, when we read a book like that, that's called, the structure is called description. Alright, so today we're only learning about two different types of text structure. We're learning about compare and contrast, and we're learning about description. Now looking at these two, can you match these two passages up with the right story structure? Which one goes with compare and contrast and which one goes with description? Right, because it describes how to take care of a frog. It doesn't necessarily describe a frog, but it does describe how to take care of a frog, and that's description, just like describing what the frog looks like and does. Okay? So what I'd like to do today is I'd like to talk about some signal words that you sometimes see when you're reading that help you recognize whether something is compare and contrast or if it's description. And the person who made these posters for me, they used some of these signal words. They wrote it right on there to help you look at them and identify them as things that help us. Now looking at the Frog and Toad Readers Theater, do you see any words that appear in this? We have different, instead of, however, same as, alike. You see any words like that in here when you read it? And different, very good. So those are signal words telling us that this is a compare and contrast. All right. Why do you think it's important to know?
Because how frogs and toads are saying.
All right. So let me finish the question. I was going to ask you, why do you think it's important to know whether the text structure is compare and contrast or if it's description? How does that help us as readers?
To know how toads and frogs, how they feel,
Okay, but if we were talking about any other story, for example, I have a story about bottlenose dolphins, okay? Why would it be helpful to know whether this is a compare and contrast before I read or if it's a description? How does that help me as a reader?
To know how
All right, let me tell you, and you're going to listen carefully and then you're going to tell me back, okay? If you understand the structure that the author is writing in, it helps you know what to expect as you're reading. If you know it's going to be a compare and contrast, and you're ready to compare and contrast two things, then it's going to help you understand more of what you read. So as a good reader, the first thing we want to do before we start reading nonfiction text is we want to look through it and say, okay, what structure has this author written in? Now, by going through the pages of this book, on this page it talks about how they jump, all right, out of the water. On this page it talks about the parts of his body. On this page it talks about more parts of his body. On this page it talks about where they swim. All right. Are we comparing the dolphin to anything in this book? Okay. So are we going to call this compare and contrast, or are we going to call this description? Why do we call it description? What's it describing?
How they look, how they sound.
Okay, so it's helpful to be ready for that kind of information, to know what to expect before you read. Alright, so I have this book, and this is descriptive, and I also have this reading passage right here, and this is called Dolphins and Porpoises. Do you know what a porpoise is? Have you ever heard that word? Porpoise? Not a purpose, a porpoise. Alright, so I'm going to read a little bit to you, and tell me if you can recognize why this is compare and contrast. Okay, because I'm already going to tell you it is compare and contrast. You tell me how you know that. Do you know the difference between a porpoise and a dolphin? Both can be found in oceans all over the world, and both are in the same family of animals, which includes 400 species. These ocean animals look similar, but they are very different types of creatures. Okay? What are some things that help you understand that this is compare and contrast?
It's dolphins and porpoises.
The title, dolphins and porpoises, we know we're talking about two things, right? What else helps you to understand that we're comparing these two things?
They both are found in oceans.
Okay, good. So you're talking about that word both. You use that word both. That word both is a signal word. It may not be in this list, but both is a signal word that tells us that this is the way that they're the same. Do you see any other signal words on that paper?
Different.
Difference. And when you see that word difference, we're talking about how they are
Different.
how they are different. Are there any other words?
Similar.
Similar. Do you know what similar means?
Like almost the same.
Almost the same. Excellent job. Okay. So there are many other text structures besides compare and contrast and description. Some examples would be sequence. Alright, that's telling things in time order, like if you were to read a biography and it talks about when this famous person was young and then what happened after they grew up and what made them famous. It's kind of told in time order, and we call that sequence. And then we have something called cause and effect, and we learned about that in 3rd grade. But sometimes that's the structure of a story. Something caused something else to happen. Okay? And finally, problem and solution. That might be an article that you read that talked about how we need to start recycling because there is a problem with so much trash in the world. That would be an example of a problem and solution structure. But we don't need to know these three. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about them so you know that there are different kinds besides compare and contrast and description. But these are the ones that we're focusing on today. Now what you might notice here is that I have something called a Venn diagram. And we did one of these before when we did the frog and toad. Remember that? We use this type of graphic organizer to help us. And then we also have a graphic organizer that's called a web. And this is another thing that we use where we take the topic, whatever we're talking about, we're reading about, and we put the main topic in the middle, and we write about the things that describe that on the outside. Okay? So we use this type of graphic organizer to help organize our thoughts in compare and contrast. And if you look at this web right here, it kind of looks like mine a little bit, doesn't it? This is the kind of web we might use to help us with a description of something. So we're not going to do compare and contrast today because we already did that. But we're going to begin to work on this web of a descriptive writing, alright, using the bottlenose dolphins up close. Okay? So I'm going to give you a pencil and a paper. And I told you a little bit about this book. Tell me, what's going to go in my center circle? Do you have any idea?
How they look.
Okay, so our main topic, our main idea of what we're reading about today is the
Bottlenose dolphin.
That's right, the bottlenose dolphin, and that word is going to go right in the center. And everything we learn about the bottlenose dolphin, the way he looks, the way he moves, okay, the way he communicates, all these things are going to go on the outside. And then we can understand the relationship of all that he does to him. Alright, so go ahead and write the word bottlenose dolphin right in the middle circle. Good. And let's begin to read. Now what I like to do when I read nonfiction is I like to kind of skim through the table of contents first to kind of learn what I'm going to be reading about. It says ocean acrobats. You know what an acrobat is? Somebody that can do flips. Do you remember the dolphin flipping in that one picture? Then we have built for speed, and that has to do with all those flippers and stuff that helps him to move really fast. Snouts, teeth, and more. Why do you think it would be important to know about the dolphin's teeth? What's that going to help us understand?
To know how they eat fish.
That's right, how they catch their prey, right, that they're going to eat. That's excellent. Would you begin by reading Ocean Acrobats And nope, we're going to read on this one instead. Built for speed. And we're going to kind of put a heading right here. We want to learn some things about the way a dolphin moves. Okay? That's where we're going to begin. And we want to put some notes in there about the way the bottlenose dolphin moves. Would you read that page for me?
A bottlenose dolphin's rocket shape and body is built for speed. There's slippers.
Okay, so you're almost there. You see the word slipper, but it has a Y on the end. Slipper, slippery. You remember at the end of the word, a Y sounds like a long E, right? Good. They're slippery.
Skin cuts through the body. Powerful tail flakes move up and down like a paddle. They use slippers to move. They use
You got that right. Dorsal. Excellent. Okay, so remember what I told you when you have one consonant between two vowels, we're going to separate it before that consonant. So this is ba. Balance. Very good. Okay. So on this page, they talked about how the dolphin's body is built for him to go really fast. So the first important detail we want to understand is he moves fast. So I might put a note in there that he moves fast. And I just put the word fast. I don't need to write sentences. Now I start asking myself, what makes him go fast? We learned about parts of his body here. They're highlighted. See these words that are extra light? Sometimes when you see a word that's really dark or really light, it's a signal that you might have a definition for those at the bottom. Do you remember what parts of his body help him move so fast? His flippers, that's right, his flippers. What else helps him move? It says he has dorsal. Mm-hmm. You were right, powerful. Now, the first time you said that word, you said flakes, but that's not an A, is it? That's an unfamiliar word, and flakes is a word that you're familiar with, but you have to pay attention to that vowel. Okay, usually when we have an E at the end, it's a long U. It's going to be flukes. Flukes. So think about a paddle in a boat. If his tail flukes move powerfully up and down, if you could move a paddle really fast, would that make your boat go fast?
Yes.
So his flukes move up and down just like paddles do. So what do we want to add to the way he moves? How does he move so fast? What are some more words we can add to this to help us understand how he moves fast? Mm-hmm. Good. And does he have any other body parts that help him move fast?
His flippers.
His flippers. And one more thing, his tail. Tail what? What's that word? Long U sounds like ooh. Flukes. Good, flukes. Okay, so all of those parts of his body help him to move fast. And it also says something interesting, that he has a rocket-shaped body. His body is shaped like a rocket, and a rocket can move really fast, right? So probably the shape of his body helps him to move fast as well. Okay, do you want to include that?
Yeah.
His rocket-shaped body. Okay, good. So let's start to look through this book. We're not going to read anymore, but we're going to think about what are some other things that we want to include. We learned about the way he moves. What else did we learn about? What are we going to learn about on this page? It says snouts, teeth, and more.
We're going to know how he uses his teeth to catch prey.
Okay, so it might be a part about his eating habits, and we might learn things about his eating habits. So let's put what he eats here, or how he eats. Just the word eats, because that's going to be a category we're going to learn about. Good. Ooh, dinner time. That's going to have more information about that. And now we have something called catching sound waves, and a word called echolocation. Have you ever heard that before?
It's like talking but with associated sounds.
Okay, good. So that might be another area we talk about as well. But we're going to look at this again on Thursday when we come back together. And we're going to read this book more thoroughly. And we're going to start putting some information down and organizing the information that we learn to help us understand it better. Okay? Can you tell me what type of text structure this is? Now when I said text structure, I was talking about these. Do you remember these? Is it a description or a compare and contrast? Compare and contrast. Are we comparing and contrasting anything here? These were our choices: compare and contrast or description. Remember, it looks just like this graphic organizer, okay? So we're going to practice with this some more, and I just want to remind you that the reason we want to think about the way that the author has constructed the information is because it helps us understand better. We know right now that we want to use this type of graphic organizer to understand things, because the Venn diagram is not going to help us, is it? Because we're not comparing the dolphin to anything else. We're looking for a description of that dolphin. All right, you did a nice job. Thank you.